Very nice.
It's
a
just
little cobalt. It's a Chicago
Oh yeah,
okay. I know
single
so.
barrel. It's pretty good.
very nice.
Same thing, whiskey and apple cider.
Oh, there you go, Dan. All right. Well, Becky's drinking a hot whiskey toddy. That's a great idea.
That is a good idea.
Delicious. Anybody else? What you're sipping on? I'm holding out for the tasting. I don't have a pre-drink, just my sparkling water. Excellent. Well, welcome everybody to our November Missouri Whiskey Society meeting. I was just telling them that we were supposed to be doing in-person and virtual, but we're all virtual tonight, which is safer and better for the greater good of everyone. So thanks for sticking with us as we stay virtual throughout this time. A little bit of kind of Missouri Whiskey Society updates. Some of you are on our Facebook group, some of you aren't. So I just wanted to make sure you guys saw the email that went out last night for the toy drive that we're doing to benefit Mission St. Louis. And what we're doing is, if you can go to that email, you're gonna ship a gift. If you want to participate, you can ship a gift to me at my house. I will not re-gift it, put it underneath my tree, I promise. But I will be collecting the gifts and then taking them over to Mission St. Louis. And what they're doing, it's really cool. It's called Affordable Christmas. And it's not where they just take the donations and give everything away. They actually set up a virtual store. It used to be in person, but now it's virtual. And families with low income or income issues with the current times, they get to shop. So they'll spend like a couple bucks on an item. So they still have that feeling like they did purchase something and feel that ownership of actually being able to provide for their family, but it's done at a super reduced cost. So I think it's a really great model in what they're doing. They were just on Fox 2 News the other morning, and during the morning segment, they had 200 more families sign up for needing to participate. So just showing the need that we have in our community. And also want to just say, if you or anybody you know is struggling, they can reach out to Mission St. Louis to look for support this holiday season. So definitely pass that on to them. But look at the email, it has all the instructions. And the best thing about this is that if you donate, you get entered into a raffle to win some fun whiskey prizes. One of them is going to be that Jim Beam Advent calendar with some other whiskeys and other merch. So you'll get some good stuff if you win from that. That's kind of the other thing is we are not going to have a holiday party, just again, social distancing, but we'll be getting back together in January. So without further ado, most of you guys have some whiskeys in front of you that I'm sure you're excited to start tasting. I want to give a big thank you to Dana. Dana's been such a huge supporter of us during COVID and helping us through this time. So Dana's brought to us Virginia Distillery. Shoot, what was the last one you did, Dana? It wasn't Virginia. It was another one.
Oh my gosh, I think it was Virginia, wasn't it? Because
we did 2 Virginias. Maybe that's what enough. Okay. And then she's bringing Dry Fly to us tonight. So thank you, Dana. I'm going to pass it over to you and you can do the introductions to your team.
Okay, thank you. And welcome everybody. We really appreciate everybody getting on this evening, and we're looking forward to tasting whiskeys from Dry Fly. They are out of Washington State. And we have Terry Nichols, who is the Vice President of Marketing. And then he's going to tell a little bit about himself, and then he will introduce Don, and then we will get into it. I think we will watch a 5-minute video, and then we will get into the tastings. And is everybody comfortable and they have all their tastings? Do they have any questions of everyone's got everything and ready to go?
I think so. And I just want to say sorry for those that just got in. I was talking and I forgot to hit the admit button, the admit button. So sorry you were sitting there for a little bit. You didn't really miss anything. Just take a look at your email for the toy drive. That's the only thing you missed. All right, Terry, sorry to bump in there.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, so I'm Terry Nichols. I've been with the company here, Dry Fly, for just 2 years. Prior to that, I was in the distribution business for about 30 years. And we had a distribution company that focused on fine wine, craft beer, and largely artisanal spirits for a long time. And we sold that company in 2017. And I needed something else to do. And Don Poffenroth, who was, was one of the brands that we represented, was Dry Fly. So Don called and asked if I wanted to buy out his original partner, Kent Fleshman. And so I did that and joined the company in 2018. But I've been involved with them for years. Great company, great story. So I was really honored when he asked me to come join the ownership and team here. So with that, I'll toss it over to Don. He is the original founder of Dry Fly and the first distiller. I know he doesn't like the term master distiller because it's kind of nebulous and doesn't have any specific criteria to it, but he is all of that. So with that, I'll let him take over.
Thanks, Terry. Welcome. It's great to be here. Hope you guys have some awesome questions. And I'm going to show we actually just had a 5-minute video done. So I'm going to try to use this high technology stuff to show you guys a little video on Dry Fly. You'll be the first people to see this other than all of us. So this works out great. If not, we'll punt. He's working on it.
I don't know if that's working so good.
Is it working?
The audio isn't coming through.
No audio?
I can send a link if you, well, you guys aren't, if I send a link, you guys could all open the link and look at it.
Yeah, can you actually send me the link? I might be able to play it with the audio.
Okay, let's try that.
See technology.
Are you emailing it or putting it in the chat?
Oh, I was emailing it.
Okay, I just wanted to make
There you
sure I was looking. So Don, while we're getting this set up,
Yes.
give us a little, where are you at right now? Tell us where you're at.
We're actually both in the office right now. So we've been here all day. We're in a very unique position of being perpetually behind everything currently. So we are literally manufacturing 10 or 12 hours a day. And we introduced a line of canned cocktails about a year ago, and it has exploded to a incredible degree, way past our capacity. So we're here late and early.
And you guys are in Washington State. What
Again,
part?
Washington, yeah. We're on the border basically of the state of Washington and Idaho.
So we are not talking to anybody local. It's 5 o'clock their time, 7 o'clock our time. All right, so I got the link, but what am I clicking on? Didn't go to the Vimeo. It says the video is private. Oh.
You should be able to sign on though, right? Is it asking for a password?
Yeah, I need a password for the video.
Yep, Dryfly, DRYFLY 2020.
Yeah,
Super
it's right
complex.
there underneath the link is the password.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just clicked on the link in a hurry.
All good.
All right. Let me get my screen sharing. Thanks for your patience, everyone, as we get this going.
Fly fishing is the ultimate expression of the
Can you
sport of
hear it?
fishing. It takes the sport to its
Yes.
most artistic and yet simple form. A rod, a reel, some line, a hook, and some feathers. Anyone can fly fish. I've been fortunate to teach quite a few. And what I always try to impart to them is that the act of fly fishing can either be the most simple or complex thing, depending on how you want it to be. One can choose to make it easy, or one can target specific fish, or casts, or approaches, and make it the most complex thing ever. At its core, fly fishing is about patience, persistence, and sometimes perfection. So is producing small batch spirits. With spirits, we can take the easy path and drive price-driven production and business. Or we can slow it all down, focus on every tiny point, make it artistic. We can choose the grains carefully, ferment slow and easy, and distill with great care. You can taste the result in all we do. Simple or artistic, we choose the latter.
Dry Fly is a 13-year-old craft distiller, founded in 2007 as the first distillery in the state of Washington since Prohibition.
I'm an active person. I enjoy being outside. That's part of the whole fly fishing thing that I think started Dry Fly. I'm a born and raised Spokane, Washington kid. Been here my whole life.
You know, I grew up in Spokane. I went to North Central High School. Best buddy's dad is opening a distillery and he asks you to come work for him. You're probably not going to say no.
When we started Dry Fly, it was the idea that to make alcohol taste better. John was out drinking some vodka at the time and supposed to be the world's best vodka, and he did not agree with that's the best that somebody could do.
All of our equipment came from Germany, interestingly enough, from a company called Christian Karl, which is the oldest continuous still manufacturer in the world. A great family-owned company that kind of reflected who we were.
The way they design stills is marginally different than they did, 100 years ago.
Started with two core products, vodka and gin. We made whiskey early, but we had to run it through a minimum of 2-year aging process.
Dry Fly was the first distillery in the country to do 100% wheat whiskey.
Our first validation came in 2009. We won double gold, best in show, in the biggest spirit competition in the world. And, a year and a half in, it was pretty clear that we were doing things the right way.
Distilling is something that sounds so glamorous. It's, I want to go make alcohol, but you're just kind of a mechanic for alcohol in the way. You're taking a raw grain and creating it into a really fine spirit. It takes a lot to get it there.
In distilling, your end product is nothing more than the sum of a bunch of choices you make along the way.
We'll take new risks on whiskeys and new grains and everything, but we make it the same way every day. Like you turn the dial twice, you turn the dial twice.
We've never cut corners here. We're genuinely done things the hard way.
Our farmers, our agricultural connections are all within a 30-mile radius of our facility. So that's incredibly important to us. Every primary farm we use is over 100 years old, so they're all century farms.
Some of those flavors you pick up are just very exclusive to Eastern Washington for the grain that we grow out of this region. So it's a fun way to portray Spokane back to the rest of the world now with, through our spirits and everything.
Dry Fly sells product in 30 states across the U.S. We export to a number of countries. That continues to be opportunity for us to grow our company. But we always keep in mind that we got to take care of our backyard. So that's always primary. This community has been incredibly supportive of us. Our favorite and most intense fans are right here in Spokane.
We're very fortunate that we have a wide variety of skill sets that all kind of work together to be greater than the sum of the parts.
I've been working at Dry Fly for over 11 years. I was the employee number 1. Yeah, it's been a heck of a ride.
We've been very fortunate to find some amazing young people that work for us. We started with a crew of 2, and today we have 13 employees, and away we go.
Well, one is lacking, the other one excels it. And so we create, that one super bond for, our powers combined.
We're sitting in a position now where we have older whiskey as a small distillery, and we have well-developed products.
When you have really good spirits, you don't have to try that hard to make them taste good. You have to try really hard to mess it up. So we just kind of let the spirits shine and train people on what spirits should and can taste like, and then cool ways to use them in some different fun cocktails.
That's one thing you can say about Dry Fly, and that is that if we say we do something, then you can take that to the bank. We just work hard every day and let it happen.
You're doing a trade that has been done for a long time, and it's really unique, and it's incredibly gratifying.
You know, I think one thing that's key in the craft distilling world is that you've got to continue to innovate. You've got to continue to push the boundaries and try new things.
We had to make alcohol for a living and then subsequently call it a job. So pretty cool.
All righty.
Kind of worked.
So I think the next thing we'll do is we'll talk about our products a little bit. We have three things I think in front of you. We have our 100% wheat whiskey, triticale, and our bourbon 101. And that's kind of the order we'll go in. We'll start with wheat whiskey. And by all means, if you have any questions, please ask. When Dry Fly started, we actually started kind of working on this in 2006. And when it really came to us getting into production, our primary focus was to use items that came from our local area, a fairly simplistic approach. So we became very driven in ensuring that our raw materials that we use in this facility come from within a 30-mile radius of this facility. We have two primary farms we work with. As I said in the video, both of them are in excess of 100 years old. They're both homesteaded properties. These are long-term family farms. And I believe that the raw material makes a huge difference. And we do everything we can to work with those farmers to make sure that when we are out and we participate in harvest, we're in the field. I literally see one of my farmers every single week. We are very hyper agricultural, and it is definitely a big part of who we are. That is personified in our wheat whiskey. So we were the first distillery in the US to make 100% wheat whiskey since Prohibition. There were some kind of bourbon blends that were tilted over to the wheat side. We went all in on wheat, and we use a very specific variety grain grown on a very specific piece of property. So we almost take a terroir approach to how we do grain. And it's super important to us. And we think that comes out in the bottle. So Dry Fly has never done any small barrel aging. Everything we do is 53 gallon. That's kind of who we are. John asked a question. Maybe Elizabeth, you can read it to me because I can only see part of it.
I'm muted. Is your wheat whiskey a sour or sweet mash?
It's probably more of a sweet mash. I mean, we don't put it through a sour kind of a hold, for lack of better terminology. We have always enzymed our whiskey, so we don't use malted grain. And the reason is if we were to use malted grain, we couldn't pull directly from the farm. So once some grain goes to the malting house, unless you're fortunate enough to have a micro malter in your area, you lose track of that farm connection. And we definitely wanted to maintain that farm connection. So we use enzymes, and it is in our process produces who we are. I think it's definitely part of our equation. So we've done that since day one. But great question. So wheat whiskey, 100% wheat. We use, again, a very specific variety. It's the variety of our wheat is called Madsen. It was developed at Washington State University, which is our agricultural college here, in the 1950s. And that's rare only from the point that usually a grain variety lasts around 15 years. And then there's something in the environment that makes that grain susceptible to something it has a problem that the growers have to work around. So this is a very rare grain that it has been, grown for 60 plus years and is still grown today. There's not a lot of it grown anymore. It gets a little more difficult for us. We ultimately have to seed for ourselves, meaning we have to take a portion of the crop every year and seed it out and take it through a process of cleaning it to a higher degree so we can plant it the next year. And that is kind of our own internal then seed source. So we have stuck with that forever. We are, as I said in the video, again, our equipment is from Germany, Christian Karl. They're the oldest continuous still manufacturer in the world. They're 175 years old, I think, this year. So they're incredibly good at what they do. It is a family-run company, still in the original family. I think it's in the 4th or 5th generation currently. We call ourselves part of the Karl family, and it is important to us. I'll talk a little bit later about a new facility we're building and show you guys a little bit about that. But we're not straying very far from our roots, I'll tell you that for sure. So wheat whiskey, I think, in the world of whiskey, and I don't want to diminish what wheat whiskey can be, is what I like to call a starter whiskey. I mean, it is a very soft, mellow, if it's done correctly, it picks up these butterscotch vanilla tones. Some of that is barrel side, some of that is grain side, some of that is how you choose to ferment, what temperature range do you choose, how you cut your whiskey. We typically take incredibly narrow cuts. We take a 30 or 35 proof band that we put in a barrel. And our philosophy behind that has always been that the better liquid we can put in the barrel, the less work the barrel has to do and the more character that can come out of the barrel. So it's something that we've done from day one and continue to do. Versus taking wider cuts and being a little more production oriented and pulling more yield out of the equation, we'd rather just make sure that what goes in that barrel is perfect.
Speaking of barrels, as you know, Missouri, the Ozarks has the best, American white oak.
Yeah.
Where do you guys get your barrels from? And
we basically have 2 suppliers. I mean, we used to be 1 supplier. We used to pull out of Louisville, Kentucky. We currently buy from Independent Stave, which is in Missouri, and we pull from Barrel 53. The wood is Missouri. The cooperage house, I think, is in the Carolinas, actually. So those are our 2 sources, and it's split about 50-50. We used to go single sourcing, but as you're all aware, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, there was a significant shortage of barrels, and it drove the price of an average barrel from $165 a barrel up to close to $400. And we made the decision at that time that we needed to diversify and not stick with 1 supplier. So that just gave us a little more leverage in the marketplace. Today we do kind of 2 barrels really just to kind of keep ourselves in balance and make sure that our supply line is not affected. For sure. But as I said in the video also, we've never done anything other than the 53-gallon barrels in this facility. So we use a few charring levels, a few toasting levels for barrel ends, but for the most part, we're a medium char, medium toast company. We pretty much ride the middle of the story. Any other questions on wheat whiskey, or I'd be happy to chime in with some more trivial data.
What time of year when you harvest the wheat? I'm curious about that. Since you spoke about
Great question. So harvest typically here is done in August, and typically from the 2nd week of August through the 1st or 2nd week of September. So when we're choosing wheat with the farmer in the field, and this year was an amazing year, the yields in the field were off the hook. So our yield this year was 110 or 120% of average. So a significant number. Unfortunately, the price per bushel of wheat is in the toilet. So although the farmers got more wheat, they're not getting paid for it, which is unfortunate. That being said, when we go out with the farmer, and we're in a very unique scenario that our farmer silos for us on his property. So when we go out in the field, pick the wheat we want, it goes into a separate silo. And the same thing happens with triticale. Those 2 wheats are grown by 1 particular farm. And so we silo each one of those separately, and that allows us to kind of pick and choose. So what we typically look for is we look for the lowest protein content we can find. So protein is typically offset by the starch content of the grain. We want starch. That means fermentable material for us. Protein, ultimately at the end of the day gums our system up. So that means typically we're pulling grains off the top of hills. We want it to be more sunny, drier, and they typically then will have less protein in them. So that's when we're out with the farm and with the farmer, that's where we're choosing our grain from, is less draw oriented, more sun dried oriented. Great question. I could have just made that all up. You guys would never know. But it sounded really good. Any other questions on wheat? When we started doing wheat in 2007, so maybe 2008 or 2009, when we had finally figured out what we wanted to be when we grew up, we started stashing barrels. So we're heading into our 14th year, and we have 11 or 12-year-old wheat whiskey. I would have personally thought that the barrel would have decimated the wheat whiskey by now, meaning it would have taken over. The tannins maybe would have become more prevalent. That has not happened. That wheat whiskey at 10 years old is pretty freaking cool, actually. So we look forward to being kind of the first producer in our industry of a 10-year-old wheat whiskey. We were the first producer in small distilling of a 10-year-old single malt, which we did 3 or 4 years ago. So we really like pressing that aging scenario for sure. Any other wheat questions? I'm ready. It's a Stump the Distiller. You guys can do it. I know you can. Okay, I'll move on to triticale. And triticale is a very interesting grain. And again, this kind of harkens back to our agricultural approach. We wanted to do a rye style whiskey. Rye is like the worst cuss word ever to a farmer who grows wheat, right? Rye, when you're a young person in Eastern Washington and you go work on a farm when you're 8 years old, your job is to go pick rye out of the wheat field, right? So rye is not a wheat friendly crop. It is a weed at the end of the day. So trying to find a farmer within our kind of local area to do rye was an impossibility. So we were fortunate enough to get hooked up with a seed development company and bring in triticale. And triticale is a Scottish grain. It is a grafted hybrid of wheat and rye. Genetically, it's 50-50. It's grafted like a rose is, so it's not a GMO grain. Nor is wheat, by the way. There's no such thing as a genetically modified wheat. It just doesn't happen. But rye is a grafted, or triticale is a wheat and rye grafted grain. And it does not affect a wheat crop. So that gave us the ability to interject some rye tones into a whiskey, typically compared to a wheat whiskey, which has that super sweet, mellow, soft side. A rye is typically more peppery, more spicy, for lack of better terminology. And so this gave us a gateway into rye, and we did it with triticale. We were the first distillery in the world ever to make a triticale whiskey, period, let alone 100% triticale whiskey. And again, an incredibly specific seed. There are 99 varieties of triticale grown. We test plotted out a half a dozen or so, ended up choosing a specific seed and have perpetuated that ourselves, no different than we do the wheat grain. And now I think it's probably one of the more fun things we do. I mean, I love our triticale whiskey. It is an amazing cocktail whiskey. It has a little bit more guts to it than a wheat whiskey does. I think wheat whiskey is a great whiskey all by itself, maybe sometimes gets lost in a cocktail, unless you're drinking it at 120 proof like we do all the time. But at 80 or 90 proof wheat whiskey sometimes will get lost in a cocktail. Triticale does not. So it definitely has become more of a cocktail whiskey for us for sure. And an amazing grain. We have done just some really cool things with triticale, and remains today one of my favorite things we do, just because we really innovated on that side for sure. I think you've seen in the last maybe 5 years a few major bourbon distilleries that have dabbled in the world of triticale at relatively low numbers, maybe 20% of the mash bill. To do 100% triticale, there really is only one grain seed variety that will do that, and we kind of have that cornered.
Yeah,
Way
it's
to
been
phrase.
fun to be tasting. We have a local distillery in St. Louis called Still 630. We had them on a few months ago. And they had one, some of you were probably on there where they took hops, beer. I think they took the mash left over from the beer and then distilled that down, which obviously had hops in it. And it was funny, like it totally freaked me out and blew my mind because you're tasting, it's just amazing when you're taking different grains and just the flavors that you're getting out of it. And that's what I love about when, smaller distilleries take the opportunity to explore these different grains. Big companies can't do that. They have to stick to what's tried and true. But you're able to take stuff like this on, and this is beautiful, would be beautiful in a cocktail. Obviously I'm sipping it straight, but I can see what you mean by the complexity of the flavor to really come out through different cocktails. So that being said, what is your favorite cocktail that you make with this particular whiskey?
It's simple. It makes probably the best old fashioned you can make. I mean, it just, because it can take that little tone of sweetness and work off those orange tones, I think it makes an amazing. I mean, when I have an old fashioned, it's with triticale, period.
And are you guys experimenting with other grains right now? Or are you just?
We basically we make about 11 different varieties of whiskey, and some of those are, in all honesty, barrel finishes. So we have really pressed our world into taking the whiskeys that we make and figuring out finishing opportunities. So that ranges from port finishes. So we've done port finish wheat, which typically before 2010, anything that was done in a port barrel was really a single malt. I mean, even the bourbon guys weren't doing barrel finishes. Now that's changed more recently, but we have definitely pressed the zone on using our local wineries and experimenting in that arena of barrel finishes. And it's an amazing way. Kind of as a distiller, you have a few choices. You have a choice to either blend your way into a product, or maybe we choose to finish our way into a product. So we typically tend to do single barrel expressions, very barrel oriented, versus taking 10 or 12 whiskeys and trying to figure out certain percentages and make that be something else. For us, it's simpler to do ultimately, single barrel expressions, and maybe that's 3 or 4 barrels. But when we bottle, we're not bottling 25 barrels. We're not that big.
And so those single barrel expressions, are those more of a gift shop item that you guys, or do you sell those?
On port finish wheat whiskey, we've made that a standard item for us. I think that the availability of port barrels is going to diminish over time, just because the port market is diminishing. And so we've moved to kind of more Cabernet barrel finishes. We have some amazing Cabernet vintners in this area, so that makes it easier for us to source and control. And then kind of one of the really cool projects we've done is typically when we're done with a barrel, regardless of the whiskey, it's going to a brewery or a cider maker to do a finish on one of their products, right? So we've changed that around now. We're the only distillery I know that's doing this, that we do whiskey in a barrel, we send it to a brewery for 2 years, we take it back and put whiskey back in it again, and have a beer finished product, or maybe a cider finished product from one of those guys. So it just creates this gigantic circle that theoretically can work in forever, right? Just kind of keep going back and back again. Each time one of us uses it, we add something to the equation, and it just makes it a whole new product. So we've done that too. It hasn't been national distribution oriented, because we typically, if we're going to do a brewery thing, we're going to get 5 barrels back, and it's not going to go far in the national scheme. But we've done some single barrel releases in some different states where they're oriented on projects like that, which is super fun. And that's the flexibility you have when you're a small guy, right? You can go in and play little games like that, and you guys can't do.
Actually, I think in Missouri, some of so all the beer barrel finished products fly under a single UPC in a black bottle, and it's called cask and release. And so it's essentially one item, but the breweries involved in the beer styles is always changing. And I think Power Play Beverage has the first three that we ever did, which were Pelican Brewing Company, Kettle House Brewing Company out of Missoula, Montana, and Pike Place Market Brewing Company out of Seattle. So those products I think are available in Missouri. The wine finishes, we've just really started building a stable of those from Walla Walla wineries and Yakima Valley wineries. And so we have Petite Syrah and Zinfandel and Syrah and Cab Franc, and I'm getting some Petit Verdot barrels. And so we'll have a whole bunch of these other experiments going on. So Patrick and I have kind of kicked around the idea of trying to find a name if we wanted to do a parallel to our cask and release beer barrel series that encompasses all of these different wine expressions and just have it kind of constantly rotating. Because they're very interesting products, but right now they're largely sold off a barrel at a time to a single customer, like a Total Wine and More, or somebody will buy the whole barrel and we'll bottle it for them. So they're not out there in a very big way. And some of them are really, really interesting products. So we'll see what the future holds for all of those. A lot of those barrels have been less than 6 months since we got the barrels and refilled them. So it'll probably be another 6 months before we really have any significant supply of those things to play with.
That's excellent. So something that, this is kind of a weird question, but because we're here in Missouri, we don't really see, like we know what the local guys are doing and their growth. Tell us what your footprint is. Like, where do you sell the most? Where do you, obviously Spokane is where you're at and you have that grassroots efforts, but beyond that, where do you guys really have a good foothold in the market?
Well, I'll let Terry
Well,
answer that for the most part.
yeah.
I'll also say that having Terry here has changed our world. Like having a 20-some-year distribution dude is amazing.
You know, largely our backyard is still where we sell the most. Washington's number one. Idaho and Montana are very strong. Missouri is coming on very strong. I was really impressed with Power Play Beverage as a company. They're small enough to provide the focus, and I think they've got a good group of people down there. We're doing really well there. We're doing really well up in Massachusetts is a great market for us. We're doing really well in Colorado, which cans in particular in Colorado are really exploding, which, you know, Colorado is a big outdoor kind of state. Like people do a lot of stuff outdoors, from rock climbing to skiing to all of those activities, where having a cocktail that's in a convenient to go package really plays well. But yeah, it's still our backyard, but I've been impressed with Tennessee. I went into Tennessee and I was thinking, well, you know, whiskey from Washington going into Tennessee, you know, how am I going to do there? And we absolutely just kill it in Tennessee. And I just think it's because it's a big whiskey state. Everybody, the consumer base there, I think, is very educated about whiskey. And so we do a lot of business there, which kind of took me by surprise. But yeah, it's starting to spread out. But we're in about 30 states now, and we probably have another 5 on the immediate horizon. And then hopefully within the next year or two, we'll be in all 50 or close to it.
That's awesome. Congrats. That's amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us away from the drinking, everybody.
Let's drink.
Any questions about Treaty Keeley? That whole story.
Oh, unmute yourself, Dan. Unmute.
Sorry. Any questions on Treaty Keeley or that kind of whole story?
Says the host muted me.
Well, you need to be muted, dude.
I still like Terry. There's an echo. I'm just trying to control the echo.
No, I get it. So the third item that you have, I think, is the Bourbon 101. And when we started making bourbon, bourbon hadn't been made in this state in an awfully long time. And the state of Washington was very, very unique that we adapted prohibition. We were one of the very first states. So Washington being the leader in alcohol law, we currently are, adapted prohibition 6 or 8 months before the rest of the country. So there hadn't been a bourbon made. You couldn't make bourbon outside of the great state of Kentucky until 1963, when that became our national spirit. Therefore, no bourbon had ever been made in the state of Washington. So we made, being the first distillery, the first bourbon in the state of Washington. We chose 101 because the storyline behind 101 was that when the Bottled in Bond Act came into being at the repeal of Prohibition, distillers were not allowed to bottle above 100 proof. So when the distillers would trade amongst each other, they would trade at 101 proof, right? It was their way of kind of telling the federal government, you can't control us, we'll do whatever we want. So we did 101 in our bourbon and always have done a little bit higher proof. And again, we use the same philosophy about that. We've done a little bit of blending here recently because ultimately at the end of the day, we've had to source some bourbon, and that's very rare for us because we cannot keep up with the demand. And so it is the only whiskey that we do that has any sourced juice, for lack of better terminology, in it. And we ultimately do a little bit of blending there to ultimately extend our own inventory. So that is, bourbon is a hard thing. And one of the struggles you have as a small distillery is that you move along and you continue to make product and people buy your product and you are making decisions 5 years in the future. So what we do today from a whiskey standpoint will not see the light of day for 5 years. So what we do from a production standpoint, what we can afford to barrel, what we can afford to do and put down, 5 years from now is being dictated today. And so we're working very hard as a company, and when we're done with this topic, I'll show you a little bit about it, to move to our next level, which ultimately will allow us to increase our barreling capacity and meet the needs of future customers. And as Terry said, we have this idea of world domination. So we have to continue to move forward to do that. And in order to do so, we're going to need something significantly bigger than what we have today. So
I don't want world domination. On my other screen here, I've got all the documents necessary to export one pallet to Australia. I've been working on that for like 2 weeks. I'm gonna be totally content just to have United States domination and be settled there.
Any questions on the bourbon? I think 101 proof is typically hotter than I think you would taste in our average bourbon. Again, I think that's a scenario of understanding the cuts we make, and we're super soft about how we do that, and that parlays into the end product. I think it's probably the softest 101 proof product you'll ever have. Speaking of that, I think if you ever get a chance to try our wheat whiskey at 120 proof, it will blow your mind. I mean, no one in the world thinks that's a 120 proof product. And it is, because it's so soft, it's like soft whiskey on steroids. It's amazing.
Yeah, what's your filtration process?
On whiskey, we don't chill filter. We started chill filtering wheat and triticale, both. Yeah, at 90 proof, like at 96 proof, you kind of get out of the chill haze scenario. But the proof of the whiskey will carry through. Below that, you either have to use a bottle that's not clear, and unfortunately, we use a clear bottle, or you'll get some precipitate in the bottle. And we talked our way through that for a number of years, but as our market expanded, even though we all know in whiskey, the last thing you should do is take something out of the bottle. We have to do that on triticale wheat because people were freaking out that you were getting proteins in the bottle. The whiskey was amazing, but visually from a consumer standpoint, it wasn't the right thing to do. Once we kick over 96 proof, it's not an issue, so we don't have to deal with that. In our new facility, we have some new technology that will be a kind of a softer approach. So today we run it through kind of like a 1 micron filter and chill filter it, take it down to close to freezing and run it through a filtration. There's some kind of new technology to deal with that. here in the future that will take less out of the product.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll just speak to that real quick. Particularly in the wintertime, we would get a lot of feedback from distributors. Their stores would be returning bottles that had been shipped in sub-freezing conditions. And so, you know, you got some flocculation in there. You had some proteins, flavor esters, and fatty acids that precipitated out of the liquid. And if you let the liquid come back to temperature and you shake it, everything reabsorbs in solution. But that's not a very easy thing to explain to the broader public. And really people that understand whiskey and understand the difference get it. But for the vast majority, and wheat and trit were the two things that were out there on more shelves than anything else. And so it just made sense for us to chill filter those. And then everything else that we don't chill filter now, we label as non-chill filtered on the back too. And that's actually, I think, a selling benefit, because people that want non-chill filtered whiskey can now see that it is that. So some people are putting it on the front label. We put it on the back. But yeah, that was just a decision we had to make, just because the number of bottles being returned for no good reason was starting to get a little ridiculous.
Or when you the product's good and it's great, it's just the lack of education, and it's hard to educate everybody on that. And it's a very difficult obstacle. How long is Bourbon 101 in the barrel?
Typically, we're running 3 to 4 years. And the way the law works in the U.S. is that you have to label by the youngest potential juice in the bottle. So I think our bottles are going out either 3 or 4 years. We're very fortunate that unmute. Sorry. We're very fortunate that our glass is printed pretty much per batch, meaning that we use an applied ceramic ink on our bottle, which allows us to pretty much order bottles or bottlings per barrel. So we can keep that kind of aging scenario as a fluid thing.
Great. What type of corn do you use, white or yellow? And where do you source your corn? So is corn grown locally there? Or do you have to source it more Midwestern?
Yeah, so our grain comes, the corn comes out of Spokane. It's grown next to the Spokane River. It is a yellow corn variety, and yeah, locally grown seed. Our corn is actually grown by the Hutterian settlement. So I call them the Amish with cell phones and tractors. So they are literally some of the best farmers in the area and incredibly efficient. So they have grown corn from us since the day we started.
Would you do a non-chilled filter for a store pick single barrel ?
Sure. And I think that as long as you can educate the consumer, right, it's a good thing. And I was just going to make a comment that when you look at whiskey, and you especially non-chill filtered whiskey, it rarely is in a clear bottle, right? And the reason is because of the things we've talked about. So one of the ways you can diminish that is to move into a colored bottle, that you take that complaint away from the consumer and allow that to move through. If it's a clear bottle, it's much more difficult.
I think my experience is that of the store picks we do, everything is well over 100 proof, because most people that do a store pick and want a barrel, they want it barreled just as it is. And so a lot of those are coming out anywhere from 118 to a high of about 138 proof. And so we've done some high proof wheat whiskeys, but usually the store picks are all just straight out of the barrel. So chill filtering isn't even really necessary at that proof. So it really never becomes an issue.
So I have a question with your team, specifically when you talk about your bourbon. So you were having to source some whiskey and do some blending for that. So who on your team, obviously Don, you're the master distiller. Are you strictly the only master taster, or is it a team there that's tasting and doing the final blending, or what does that look like?
That's a great question. To be honest with you, I'm barely involved in that anymore. And the reason is I'm building a new facility. So that is, for the most part, my job these days. That being said, Patrick, you saw in the video was employee number one, has been here forever. His palate is incredibly well developed. So between he and Terry, those guys kind of figure out from, hey, listen, we're buying barrels from MGP.
Mhm.
No reason to hide any of that. They're the ones who will go through and take a look at what's available in the marketplace and what we can do and what we think is going to blend in and work in our system and try to find the best fit. So we're buying, if we're buying bourbon from MGP, we're buying a wheated bourbon to go along with what we do. And we think that is what's blending in to the most part with our product the best. That being said, our bourbon has not had wheat in it for 4 or 5 years. We moved it to Triticale because we thought it made a better bourbon. The tones off of the Triticale complemented the bourbon really well. But when we're blending back, it's impossible to buy Triticale bourbon in the market because we're the only ones who make it. So we're buying a wheated bourbon and blending that in. And again, for the most part,
Yeah, I think this is, we're kind of in a pause right now, and we're just kind of in a lull from 4 years ago in terms of what was put down. And so once we get past this kind of a speed bump, we'll get back to bottling dry fly bourbon when it's of age. And the mash bill is 55% corn and 45% triticale, which is great. And it's tremendous at 4 years. I'd like to see it at 5 as our standard offering. That's what we're trying to get to. And some of that's just math, right? We got to put down twice as many as we pull out in a given year to push that year out again. And so that's part of the reason for the new facility. So we'll get there eventually. It's just sort of with our bourbon, it's become it's a little bit of a hiccup just because sales on bourbon in the United States overall are just, out of this world, off the charts. And so, like Don said, the decisions that you make 4 or 5 years ago can come back to haunt you. It's hard to have a crystal ball 4 or 5 years into the future and decide how much you need to put down. And now I think our general philosophy is we need to put down as much whiskey as we possibly can.
100%. And we're all here to help you consume that. How are you storing your barrels?
We store them ambient. So for the most part, our barrels are stored in a separate facility other than the distillery. That may change in our new facility just because we're going to have a lot more room. But typically we don't heat or cool that facility. We let it move. I think that allows the whiskey to move more within the barrel for sure. Historically, we've stored in this facility. We've been kind of storing outside this facility for 7 or 8 years. So when we stored in here, the temperature was fairly consistent. And I believe that slowed down our maturing process a little bit. I think we mature quicker when we're in more of a swing. The other interesting point I wanted to share, and Terry talked about a little bit when he talked about single barrels coming out at 138, right? In this climate, which is incredibly dry, when we get evaporation, we evaporate water. We don't evaporate alcohol. So the atmosphere seeks what it doesn't have. If you're in a high humidity atmosphere, right, you're going to lose a higher percentage of alcohol. So our friends in Kentucky and Tennessee may do barrel selections at 118 when their entry point is 122. We enter at 120, we can come out at 138.
Oh, wow.
So we definitely lose more water content than we do alcohol content. So a very rare thing. You see it in Scotch manufacturers as well, kind of the same climate scenario, a little wetter, where the alcohol percentage in the barrels increase over time, which is rare for those drier climates.
So that means barrel tastings are a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said, we enter at 120. That's our consistent entry point, and 130 and even 140 proof barrels, especially after 10 years, are not uncommon.
Excellent. That's very fascinating. Well, we're almost at an hour here, and
yeah, I want to just share. I have 2 minutes. I don't know if the technology will work, but I'm going to try.
Okay.
I just want to show you guys our new plant. So it's there's no music behind this. It's just going to be me clicking through some slides and talking about this, and it's going to maybe take 2.
Oh, you muted yourself. There we go.
Okay, so I'm going to try to see if I can make this work. And somebody give me a thumbs down if this sucks.
Dana, that's all you.
Okay, thanks.
So far.
We're drinking whiskey, nothing
I got
sucks, so.
This is exciting. It's like
Hey,
behind.
can you see the Dry Fly logo?
Yep. hmm
Here we
Yeah.
go. Big screen now.
Yep. Good job. You're winning so far.
Look at this. Okay, so a lot of people ask us like, you guys, why are you moving? Well, let me show you why. This is a look on our production floor today. We have zero room in this facility. This is about 4,000 square feet, and we literally are taking up every single square foot. We happen to have we had room in the middle here, and then we added a automated canning line, which took up all of our space. This kind of gives you an idea of the rest of our floor space facility for the most part. It's fairly insane in here. Every day we move everything inside our building outside because we don't have enough square footage. So this shows you, these are totes of water to do blending. There's some alcohol totes here of whiskey that we're getting prepared to bottle. Shipments going out, raw cans. This is kind of what it looks like every day you walk into Dry Fly. So we had to do something. So we have been planning for 4 or 5 years to move into a new facility. This tells all the people who were involved with this. And it gives you a little bit of a look at our layout here. This is 16,000 square feet. There's a mirroring 16,000 square feet below this. This is 23-foot ceilings. And we're moving all of our manufacturing kind of along this windowed wall. We've built this. Each one of these fermenters is equal to our current fermentation capacity. So we're putting in 4, which means we're going to go.
Are you
4,
moving the equipment that you have at your current facility?
all new equipment?
All from
100%
the same
all
German.
from Christian Carl. Yes.
Yep.
We'll have a tasting room in this facility, no different than our current facility. This one's significantly larger. A kitchen, restrooms, blah, 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 blah. This was our press print facility. So some awesome things happened, like locker rooms with showers and loading docks with actual real loading doors and really cool stuff that make us be like a grown-up real company, which is amazing. This is our entrance off that building. This building was built in the year 2000, and the floor load capacity is 750 pounds per square foot, which makes it a fortress. There were 1 million pound presses in here, so it can handle anything we're going to throw on the floor. This is literally in downtown Spokane, right smack in the middle. It is an amazing facility. So excited.
And what is your projection of that facility up and running?
We'll be, from a manufacturing standpoint, in here in March.
So very
So
soon.
you kind of see we'll have some offices, a conference room, kind of a rental space for event space, our tasting room underneath, and then the equipment. This is the architect's best idea of trying to make it look like a real distilling equipment. We are again using Christian Carl. So this is our primary still. This is a 100% computer automated still. So it really takes care of a lot of the decision-making processes that are built kind of into the front end of this equation. The still is 23 feet tall. So it's really hard to get perspective on this. This is a very similar still in Chicago, actually. It's CH Distilling, another Carl still. But to give you a perspective on how big that is, this guy is about 6'2" standing next to it. So it is a massive piece of equipment. This is 1,100 gallon is the still charge on this. We have 40 plates for rectifying. Yeah, and I'm so excited to have it come. Conversely, we're also putting in a small test still. So this is 70 or 80 liter. So all of our development can be done on this small still and new recipes. So a small charge still, kind of like a little piece of jewelry. And that's what that looks like. Cool stuff. And then we're building our facility to do a continuous column for stripping. So this is a 38-foot tall continuous beer stripper, basically, to do the initial distillation on. in that facility. The fermenters, this is not a great drawing from my friends at Spokane Industries. The fermenters are 22 feet tall. They're 5,000 gallons working, 7,000 gallon nominal capacity. So our current fermenters are 700 gallons. So they're 10, each fermenter is 10 times the theoretical size. So big stuff. And it gives you an idea of the scale of those.
So Don, what was your background before you started distilling?
I'm a marketing guy.
Okay.
I was in the food
All of
industry.
this is like super cool, exciting, and like all
I mean, I love the technical side of this. And when we started in 2007, understand that there were 20 distilleries in the US, small distilleries. I knew everybody. We all knew each other. When we would go to the distillers conference, there were 20 people sitting down, right? It was a different thing. So, you know, this scale and moving to this is the fruition of 14 years of work. And you know, we're not doing this because we think it's cool. We're doing this because we have to. I mean, as Terry said, we need to put each one of these fermenters, 10 or 11 barrels per fermenter of output. Our current fermenter does 1.25 barrels. So it's just a different world. It's an efficiency, you know, production oriented approach to manufacturing for sure. These are all, when the fermenters get large, they have to be agitated, meaning you have to roll them continuously or they get stuck. So this is kind of what that looks like. When you're a small distiller, you learn a few very important things. And one is you should never, ever, ever run out of steam, which we have done for 14 years. So I bought the super boiler. This is a 100% automated, runs off your iPhone, 200 horsepower boiler. We've built it to take at least one additional module to move it to 300 horsepower as we expand. This is the best and most expensive boiler in the world, and I love it. This is the only piece of equipment currently sitting in our facility, by the way. And then in the middle of our facility, we have my new drift boat, which has all the dry fly stuff on it. So why do you put your drift boat in your distillery? Because there's room. And there's me with a beautiful cutthroat trout.
Oh,
So that's my little thing. How do I unshare?
well, I think on the behalf of the Missouri Whiskey Society, we tell you congratulations. This is a awesome endeavor that you're taking. And once we're not forced to stay in our homes, we'll be excited to come and visit and take you to the new
I
space.
think you can stop share somehow, but.
Thank you guys, and thanks for listening to our story. It's all about stories.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it. I wish this whole, I don't know, this whole pandemic thing is, you know, I haven't been on the road since last February. Usually when I launch a new market like Missouri, I would have come down and spent a week, you know, traveling around the state and opening bottles and pouring whiskey and stuff. But, you know, nobody wants you to come in it right now. And, you know, everybody's got different restrictions on. So hopefully I'll get down there. I've never been to St. Louis and I've never been to Kansas City. And so I definitely want to get down there and kind of check things out and, you know, meet people. And the business is still a people-to-people business. And so COVID and these Zoom things here, while convenient, don't really replace the human interaction that you get when you fly into a market. So hopefully we'll get back to normal soon. But thanks for taking the time to Zoom with us and taste some whiskey.
One more question that I agree with that. And quickly, just when you do come in, Terry and Dana, let us know and we can pass that on to our society to come find you wherever you're visiting. One quick question was your cocktails, are any of them, your canned cocktails, any of them whiskey based?
We haven't currently done that just because we don't have enough whiskey.
Got it. Got
Plain
it.
and simple.
So
That's the
buy
truth.
a
Don't
vodka
want
one
to.
and add whiskey to it, and there you go.
We totally want to do that. We just
Yeah.
need some whiskey.
Well, speaking of whiskey, so you guys are very generous to donate a bottle of your Bourbon 101 as a raffle item to our select members of the society. And so Terry, can you please pick a number 1 through 26?
21.
21. All right, John Schaefer, he is the winner of the Bourbon 101. And then we also have a Masterson 10-year rye. Don, can you pick a number 1?
13.
Okay, 13. Brian Zielinski. I felt like I was going to say that name wrong. He is the winner of that one. So we will notify the two of them of their winnings. Excellent. And Dana, tell us where we can find Dry Fly here in St. Louis.
I will, and just so to go back for the canned cocktails, if they are curious, there's a gin and tonic, a Moscow Mule, the Huckleberry Lemonade, the spicy, there's a really hot and spicy one, a Bloody Mary, and then for the holidays, I'm super excited. They're going to have a spiced cranberry, so be looking for that. You can find all these products at all the wine and cheese locations, all of the Friar Tucks, and if you live out west at the Dogwood Spirits. And then if anybody has any questions, you can reach out to Elizabeth and she can reach out to me and we'll make sure that happens.
Excellent. Yeah, they were all delicious. Catherine said she really loved all 3 whiskeys. Becky said, congrats, wishing you continued success. So as we've been doing on our Zooms the past few times, we are ending with a little bit of a toast. I have a drip left of my bourbon I will sip off of. So Don, Terry, who has the toast for us tonight?
I'll pour you a little more to stick your
Oh,
glass.
thank you.
Now. See, it doesn't work. You got to be human to human. It doesn't work like this over the internet. Interwebs.
Here we go. Health to men and death to fish. They're wagging the tails that will pay for this. Cheers.
Cheers. Well,
It's
I want
okay.
to
I
wish.
like Elizabeth's better.
Yeah, whatever.
We'll share that. We'll talk about it later. I wish everybody, wherever you're at, to have a blessed Thanksgiving. May it just be you in your own home, eating a turkey sandwich from the deli or spending it with family, whatever it may be. Please know that we love you all and we appreciate you guys sticking with us throughout all of this. So God bless, and we will see you in January. If you need anything, just reach out to us. And if you're not on the Facebook group, make sure you sign up, and that's a great way to stay connected while we're apart. So cheers, everybody, and good night.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday.
Happy holidays.
All right.
Ciao.